Good Tag. We'll go over the Farbrengen of this afternoon. The Rebbe will begin the Farbrengen that today is Rosh Chodesh, and specialty of Rosh Chodesh is of special significance in this year because this year is a leap year. And what's the whole idea of a leap year? The idea of a leap year is that we combine the calendar year of the sun and the calendar year of the moon. And today we are celebrating Rosh Chodesh. And Rosh Chodesh is something that deals with the Levana, that deals with the moon. And the relation of the Levana to Rosh Chodesh is to such an extent that one of the names for the Levana is Chodesh. It shows how close it's tied in together. However, all of these inyanim have to be brought down in Aveda, have to be brought down into a Pu'ulan Imsheches, into an ongoing, into a continuous activity, and something which should have an effect on the entire year, on the entire Shana. Because that's the whole inyan of Shana. Shana is a year. Why is a year called Shana? Shana is Maloshan Shinuyim, Maloshan changes. Because during a year we go through various changes. And now we say that this lesson, this source of strength which we take with us from today's day of Rosh Chodesh is something which has to affect us throughout the entire year. And especially taking consideration that today is Pashas Kedoshim. And together with it, it is also Erev, the day of Beis Iyah. In other words, tonight it is Beis Iyah, and that is the birthday of the Rebbe Marash. The Rebbe kept on referring to him throughout the Farbrengen, the Baal L'Katchila Ariba. It is the Rebbe Marash who is known for his famous quotation, famous expression, which he used to say, the Welt sagt, the world says, as mekenish darunter geht men ariba. If you can't go under, then you go over. And ich sag, that's what Rebbe Marash said, and I say that the approach has to be l'katchila ariba. And the Rebbe at many occasions, and today as well, refers to this expression, that this is a very obvious lesson in all of Inyanim and Avodas Hashem. L'katchila ariba means above and beyond. In other words, our approach to all matters of Yiddishkeit has to be a broad and above and beyond approach. And that's the concept of l'katchila ariba. And tonight is the day of the birthday of the l'katchila ariba of the Rebbe Marash. And in Sfiras, it's also the Sfira of Tiferes Shebet Tiferes. And all the days of Sfira Sa'imah, the Rebbe added, come a continuation one to another. We say, for example, on the second night, we say Shnei Yomim La'imah. In other words, it's 2 days. It's the second, it's day 2. It's 2 days. In other words, we've already accomplished 2 days. We've already accomplished 3 days and so forth, especially taking into consideration that the whole union of Sfira Sa'imah is that it originated when the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim. When the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim, they had a tremendous thirst for Kabbalah Satera. That is when the Yidden began to count the days. So the Yidden were counting the days. We are getting already closer and closer to Kabbalah Satera. So when we're talking in Sfira Sa'imah, it means that every day is an additional accomplishment. Especially in light of what Chassidus explains, that the whole lineage of Sfira Sa'imah is that it purifies the midas of a person. So every day we've already gone a step further. So every day is a continuity to the day before. And in continuation to what we have accomplished previously, we have also achieved today that we have gone a day yet closer. What is the inyan of Ki Kodesh Ani? Kedoshim to you should be holy. Ki Kodesh Ani. Sanctity which the Rebbe has given into all the Eden. So Rashi says, right at the beginning of the Sedre, Prushim, we are to be separated from certain things. And by us being separated from certain things, this instills a Kedusha, a sanctity in us. So the Rebbe is also stressing here that the concept of being separated from certain things, not having a shaychus to certain things, and being involved in Kedusha, this relates very strongly, coincides to the concept of l'katchila ariba. What's the whole meaning of Kedoshim to you being holy? To separate ourselves, not to have a shaychus to those things that interfere with us, that interfere with Kedusha, and to go ahead, above and beyond, so that we will be associated with such type of inyanim that bring us to a Kedusha, that bring to a sanctity. So again,
It's the Seder of the week, and the day of Rosh Chodesh, and the fact that tonight is Teferes Shebeteferes, all of these special things are all united together. Until all these things will be brought down, the main thing of all this is that until all this is brought down into Maise, into deed, into action. In other words, a Maise hu ha'ikar. As I used the expression, Seif Maise b'machshava tchila. Initially, in the thoughts and in the planning. In other words, while we are discussing all these great inyanim, however, what's the real in-depth thing behind this? What's behind all this? The fact that it should affect the mindset, it should have an effect in action, indeed. Until all of this will lead to the coming of Mashiach, and then we will fulfill mitzvahs in the form of kemitzvahs chitzenecha. Then we will really be able to do the wish and desire of the Rebishter. Especially this year, that this is a special year. Again, the Rebbe mentioned how this year is it's a whole and complete year. It's a Shana Tmima, it's a leap year. And all of this is brought down into Mainz and into Pnimius. This was like a short Sikha, which we just mentioned. This was the first Sikha. Later, the primary Sikha of the Farbrengen today was the second Sikha, which was a longer Sikha. Second Sikha, the Rebbe began based on the Shia Rambam, which we are learning now. Incidentally, mentioned that the Shiurim of Rambam are being spread and reach out further and further to more Yidden. More Yidden are joining in. And the Shiurim of Rambam, which we are learning now, today we are finishing the halachas of Ma'aser Sheni, and we are entering the halachas of Bikurim. And the halachas of Bikurim, the first perik of Bikurim, the Rambam discusses all the 24 gifts, the 24 matnos kahuna, the 24 gifts which are given to the kohen. And in the second perik of Hilchos Bikurim, the Rambam discusses the Bikurim, the mitzvah of Bikurim. Bikurim was a mitzvah which Yidden had in Eretz Yisrael in the times of the Beis Hamikdash. In the times of the Beis Hamikdash, there was a mitzvah that the first grown of fruits had to be brought to the kohen. And that is the mitzvah of Bikurim. A person would walk out into his field, and as he would see fruit ripening on his tree, he would tie a little rope around the specific, the nicest fruit, the best fruit, and he would assign this for Bikurim. And once the fruit ripened completely, then he would bring it to the kohen, and that is the mitzvah of Bikurim. The Rebbe says this inyan of Bikurim has a shaychus to Yidden Bechlal, because amongst the many titles that Yidden have, one of the titles is Bikurim. So Bikurim is something which relates to all Yidden. And why? Very simple, because we just explained what Bikurim is. Bikurim is that a Yid has to assign the best of his new grown fruits and give that to the kohen. That is what Yidden stand for. Yidden are, in a sense, it's also the same idea, the best of all. And this also has a shaykhis to look at Chila Riba. Look at Chila Riba is also the same idea, to reach above and beyond, to reach to the top. That's the same concept of Bikurim. And even though Yidden are in a cheskas kashrus, meaning that we take for granted that things until now have also been in a stage of Bikurim, and everything until now had been properly done, but nonetheless, in Bikurim itself, there could be Bikurim of Bikurim. In other words, here we're talking in the spiritual sense. We're talking how it relates to Yidden. And in other words, we could keep on going higher and higher and yet higher. And then this is that all of these things are also discussed in this Sedra, these inyanim that the Rambam talks about in the Shiurim. There's the concept of Ma'aser Sheni and the inyan of Netar Revai. Netar Revai is what has grown the fourth year. Also has to be eaten in Yerushalayim. The first 3 years we know is Allah. We're prohibited to make use of whatever grows the first 3 years on a tree. However, then it comes the fifth, after the fourth year is Nataravai is mentioned, then it comes the fifth year. On the fifth year, then we can enjoy the fruits fully on our own. In fact, the Rebbe says in Chassidus, it's brought out the advantage of the fruit of the fifth year in comparison to the first 3 years or even the 4 years. In other words, the real Maila isn't the fruit of the fifth year. In other words, here we are taking As the Rebbe mentioned it later in the Farbrengen. Chulun shenasu altaras hakodesh. It's chulun. Chulun means it's regular tfuah, regular fruit. It has nothing to do with. Neither it's not in the. It can be. It doesn't have to be eaten in Yerushalayim. It could be eaten at home. It could be eaten by the owner of the field. It doesn't have to be given away to anybody. But this in itself is chulun shenasu altaras hakodesh. He kept it on the level of kodesh. He kept it on the level of sanctity. And this is the highest madrege which a person reaches. In other words, his gashmi is the ken yanem chum, weekday things. His gashmi is, and on what level is it? It's on a level of taras hakodesh. So it's again the same concept of lekatchila riba. It's all the same idea. He's taking his chum, his vachadika things, and he's uplifting it to such an extent that it's becoming al taras hakodesh at an equivalent. See, from a halachic aspect. Bisman Habayis, there was the concept of Tumah. Now, Truma, for example, can only be eaten with Tahara. The Truma has to be Tahara. The one who eats it has to be Tahara. Chulin means which belongs to the owner, to Vachadik. In other words, it's fruit from the market. Fruit from the market, there's no control, it could be eaten anyway. But nonetheless, there was a plus, big advantage. Time of the Beis HaMikdash, when people kept even the chulun, even the regular weekday food, they kept it on a level of kedusha. In other words, they stood away from tumah. They kept the food away from tumah. The eater of the food was away from tumah. And kept it on a level of kodesh, kept it on a level of sanctity. So in spiritual sense, it is how a yid is uplifting his gashmi is that his gashmi is at a level of kedusha. And from these inyanim which are discussed in Pashas Kedoshim, this afternoon to Mincha we read Pashas Emor. Pashas Emor deals primarily about Kahuna, even though the entire Sefer of Vayikra is called Toras Koyanim, but nonetheless, is specifically the details about a Kohen Gadol, and a regular Kohen, even about the daughters of the Koyanim, B'nais Kahuna. All these details are discussed in Pashas Emor. And Emor, right away, Rashi tells us, Emor ve'amarta. Pasuk, there's a double expression. Emor el ha-koyanim ve'amarta alayim. So Chazal raised a question, why is there a double expression of twice say to the koyanim and tell them? So Chazal interpret, and Rashi quotes it in Chumash, lahazhir gedolim al aktanim. It means that by Tumah, there's a special, simple meaning is that by Tumah, by the koyanim, there's a special cautioning that the adults also have to make sure that even the youngsters of Kahuna are also following these instructions and are staying away from Tumah. This is the simple meaning of it. But as the Rebbe is explaining it, who is Gadol and who is Cotton? A Yid is Gadol. And what is Cotton? The world. All the Gashmis, the Kinyonim, which are surrounding us, that's considered Cotton. And what are we told? Emor v'amarta, lahazhir g'dolim al aktanim. That the Godel, the Yidden, have to be cautioned, and that we have to know that the Avodah of a Yid is to make sure that the Ktanim, all the Inyanim in Welt, all the Inyanim in the world are taken care of to the fullest extent and are uplifted as it's taka required what the Avodah of a Yid is in Olam Hazeh, in this world. And here the Rebbe said he will mention something regarding the halachic aspect and the nigla of these halachas. We learn in today's Shir of Rambam that when a Yid brought all his maasros, it was after the third year, after every third year, in other words, if the 3 full years have passed and it comes the 4th year, a Yid is obligated to make sure that he makes a cleaning. He cleaned out and has given away all his maasros. And there's nothing left. He gave everything away. He gave to the Kohen, he gave to the Levi, he gave to the poor. He made sure that everything is taken care of. And the Torah tells us that a Yid has to come once in 3 years, after 3 years pass in the 4th year, and he has to come to the Beis HaMikdash and he has to proclaim, Be'arti HaKodesh min habayis, I've cleaned out all the Kodesh from the house, and there's a special series of psukim which he has to say. And the Rambam in today's Shir explains at length and in detail what he has to say. And the Rambam also says that these sayings have to be done by day only, not by night. So the Rebbe asks the question, when we are told that a mitzvah could be done only during the day and not at night. Was meint das? This means that it is considered a mitzvah asei shazman groma. A mitzvah which can be done only in a certain time. We know that positive mitzvahs asei, that can be done only in a certain time, only men are obligated to do these mitzvahs. Women are pata from doing a mitzvah asei shazman groma. So the question arises, we learn in Chumash about a case of B'nai Tzlofchad, the daughters of Tzlofchad, who there was no male in their family to get an inheritance in Eretz Yisrael, so they were the ones that got it. So they were the sole owners of land in Eretz Yisrael. So that means that they had the obligation to take care of all the trumos and all the maasros, and therefore, obviously, they had an obligation also to come to the Beis Hamikdash in the 4th year and make this proclamation that they Bi'alti HaKodesh min Abayis, we have no more anything which is in the category of Trumas and Maiseres, and everything was given away to the proper people. So the question arises from a halachic point of view, are women also supposed to say these psukim which are recited once every 4 years, being that this is a mitzvah which can only be done by day, and we know that an isha is potter from a mitzvah sasei shahazman grama, from a positive mitzvah which can only be done in at certain times. This mitzvah as well can also be done only at certain times. It can only be done during the day and not at night. So the question arises, are Noshe mechuyev in such a mitzvah? And the Rebbe is choosing B'nai Tzlofchad as an example, because here we cannot say that let a man do it and let somebody do it for them. They were the owners of the land in Eretz Yisrael, so the obligation of giving Trumas and Ma'aser was on them. So the question arises, are they also obligated to give, to recite these psukim when they come to the Beis Hamikdash? The Rebbe says we can bring an example to understand this. We can bring from Korbanos. Korbanos, we know in the Beis Hamikdash, were also brought only during the day. At night, no Korbanos were brought. And nonetheless, we know that women were able to bring korbanos. Not only were they able to bring korbanos, but we know there are specific korbanos which women are obligated to bring. So, Mamela, if women are obligated to bring korbanos, certain korbanos, and can participate in korbanos at their own desire, when they wish to volunteer in participating in a korban. So this shows us that even though a korban can only be brought by Yom, nonetheless, Noshim can bring a korban. Same says the Rebbe, we will learn. Regarding the reciting of the psukim which have to be recited, Rambam tells us exactly what has to be recited. Regarding the psukim which are recited once in 4 years, when a person makes sure that he's taking care of all his obligations of Truma and Meiser, and Trumas Meiser, and Meiser Sheni, and Meiser Oni, all these things, and Bikurim, make sure that he's taking care of everything. Women can as well participate, and even to the extent of also saying the psukim. If we look into the Rambam, where the Rambam tells us what exactly was said when a Yid said this, the Rambam brings the pasuk that a Yid would say, Hashkifa min moin kodshecha min hashamayim uvorech esamchas Yisrael, which is a pasuk, Chumash Devarim, which means Rabbeinu Shalom Hashkifa, look down min moin kodshecha from your holy residence and put blessing upon Amcha Yisrael. The expression Hashkifa is an unusual expression. Usually when you want to say look down, you say Re'ei Re'iyah. Furthermore, in Chazal it's brought out, Chazal prove that when the expression Hashkifa is used, Hashkafa is not for the good. So the question arises, Yid here is seeking the bracha of the Rebishter. And he's saying psukim that should bring bracha to what he's involved in. In fact, when the Rambam says that he says this pasuk Hashkifa min kodshecha min hashamayim avorech esamcha Yisrael, the Rambam adds on a few words. Why do we say this? And we ask the bracha from the Rebishter. So the Rambam adds on the words loseis tam b'pri, to give taste in the fruit and the new fruit which is going to grow. So we're eager and anxiously asking from the Rebishter a bracha for new fruit, that the new fruit will grow, should have time, should have taste. So why is it that the Chachamim have chosen that we use a pasuk that has the word of hashkifa, and hashkifa, as we know, Chazal tell us, is hashkafa is not for the good. There are many other psukim which can be used, which spell out very clearly in the meaning of bracha. So the Rebbe brings out on the contrary. Hi hanei senes. This is the explanation. L'katchila ariba. In other words, the bracha is such a strong bracha, which Yid is saying here, that even an expression of hashkifa, which normally hashkafa is not for the good, here we are stressing that even something undesirable is also converted and becomes desirable and becomes a source of bracha, losses tam bepri, to give taste into the fruit. The Rebbe says that there's a story in Gemara that a Yidden once came to a Tana and asked a bracha for their child. The child was seeking a bracha. So he mentioned something which obviously did not seem that he gave them a bracha. The expression that he used did not seem that he gave them a bracha. And when they left him and they came to a different city, they found out that everything worked out perfectly and it wasn't in of bracha. So the question arises, why did he have to speak in a way to scare the people? And they should be skeptical and not realize that they got a bracha. He could have spoken out very clearly and told them that he's giving them a bracha for their child. So the explanation is that this is a deeper bracha. This is a bracha which comes from such a source, which obviously we may think that it's not an inyan of bracha. So we say that the bracha here comes from such a high level, from such a madrege, that even something which does not obviously seem as an inyan of bracha is also an inyan of a bracha, is also an inyan of a blessing. The Rebbe says that at the end of Torah Shebiksav, when we make a siyum on all of Chumashim, we have the expression of La'enei Kol Yisrael, which is an inyan which involves all of Klal Yisrael. And when we have the siyum in Torah Shebal Peh, the siyum Mishnayis is Hashem Yevorech Es Amoi Basholem, inyan of Shalom and inyan of peace. And we say Basholem. Basholem, Chassidus explains at length, refers to two levels in Shalom. There's an inyan of Shalom and Pamal Yishalom. If there's an inyan in Shalom and Pamal Yishalmata, higher level of Shalom and a lower level of Shalom. And what are we told? That what is the whole inyan of Torah? The whole inyan of Torah is to bring to Shalom. Here the Rebbe mentioned, we recite the Pirkei Avos, which we recite during the summer weeks. Before we say the Perek of Pirkei Avos, we start off with Kol Yisrael. Kol Yisrael yesh lam chelek le'olam haba. That same thing of reciting Pirkei Avos is really only a minig, it's only a custom. This Kol Yisrael, this quotation of Kol Yisrael is taken from Masechta Sanhedrin, and in the last Perek of Masechta Sanhedrin, which is called Chelek, which discusses everybody that has a share, Chelek, a share, in Eilam Haba, in the world to come, that is where this quotation is taken from. This is actually an inyan which the Rebbe mentioned last week also at length. So even though the etzem custom of saying Pirkei Avos is something which is a minhag, but nonetheless, when we are reciting Pirkei Avos, we are fulfilling a mitzvah min HaTorah. Why? Because we are learning Torah. Pirkei Avos, it's Torah. So when we learn Torah Shebal Peh, as well as when we learn Torah Shebiksav, we are mekayim a mitzvah of Talmud Torah. The Rebbe says, similar to this is also there's a custom of making hakafas. Hakafas is a minig. Nonetheless, what is the practice of this minig of making hakafas? When we do hakafas, it brings us into a madrega of simcha, and it brings us into the madrega of simcha. So we're fulfilling the mitzvah sasei of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu through simcha, or as the pasuk says, "Tachas asher lo yavaritos Hashem Elokecha b'simcha v'tuv lavav." So, in other words, what we are doing is really a mitzvah d'Rabbanan. Or not even a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, it's a minig as far as hakafas is concerned. But when we fulfill this minig, it leads to it that we are mekayim a mitzvah min HaTorah. And the Rebbe brings, well, it tells us, La'ilam yasik oda b'Torah shaloi lishma,
A person should always learn Torah, even Shaloi Lishma. Shemeteich Shaloi Lishma, Ba Lishma. Because when he will learn Shaloi Lishma, not for the sake of learning Torah, he may learn for any other side intentions, but as long as he's learning, this will ultimately lead him to learn Torah Lishma. What's the pshat la'olam at all times? Olam is explained in Chassidus, comes from the word halem, a cover-up. In other words, when there is a revelation of godliness, when a person is at a proper level, then he will learn Torah Lishma. But here we are told, even when he's standing at a level of la'olam, meaning standing at a level of halem, things are concealed. And nonetheless, he should also be involved in learning Torah. And at that time, he's learning Torah naturally Shaloi Lishma, not for the pure intention of learning Torah Lishma. Still, he should learn Torah. Why? Shemeteich Shaloi Lishma, because from learning Shaloi Lishma, he will come Lishma. The Rebbe is concluding, we're talking about a Yonam of Siyam, about a Siyam of Torah Shebeksav, and we're talking about the Siyam of Torah Shebal Peh, and here we're talking about the Yonam, the Siyam in the Rambam, in the halachas of Ma'aser Sheni, the beginning of the halachas of Bikurim. So as we're talking about Siyumim, it's the proper time that it should be a Siyum on Golas. Golas should be the Siyum, the end of Golas. And then we will have Mashiach coming. Mashiach will come in the middle of Sfira, then a problem will arise. What's the problem? Now our counting Sfira is Midrabanan. When Mashiach will come, the obligation will be again Minatayra counting Sfira. Now, Sfira Saimer is discussed at length in Poskim. It's not just that every day is a separate mitzvah. It's really like one package. It's one package of counting 49 days. So what's going to happen is, in the middle of this package, the chiyuv is going to change from a chiyuv midarabanan to a chiyuv minatayra. But the Rebbe says, this problem we will overcome. Main thing is that let Mashiach come. Only question is, Mashiach will come, and the obligation of Sfira Saima will become such minatayra. Then the question is, does the obligation of Darabanan still remain? The Rebbe compares this. The Rebbe chose the Leviim, that they should become Leviim. So the question arises, before that, they were Yisraelim. So when he becomes a Levi, does it mean that all the advantages that he had before disappear, and all he gains is the Maila, the advantage of being a Levi? Or no, the milas from before remain. And in addition to what he has from before, something additional came into him that now he was chosen to be a Levi. Here the Rebbe led into another inyan that has a shaykhas to the Rebbe Marash. And that is, it's interesting, there are many svarim that are printed mamorim from the Rebbe Marash. But the way we have the Svarim in Lubavitch, when the Rebbe Marash said his Mamorim, there was no printing system of printing his Mamorim or typing the Mamorim and so forth. So the Mamorim were handwritten. And there was a writer, very, very much known in Lubavitch. His name was Reb Shmuel the writer, Reb Shmuel the Schreiber, Reb Shmuel HaSeifer. He had a beautiful handwriting. And he would write the Mamorim that the Rebbe Marash said. And it seems like he was a fast writer, and as many times he had a chance to write the Maimah, that's how many copies there were around from the Rebbe Marash's Mamorim. It was a different day and age. And probably there were other writers as well, but the most famous one was Reb Shmuel the Schreiber. When the Rebbe Marash's Mamorim were printed here in America, if I remember correctly, it was probably while the Frierdiker Rebbe, from the days of the Frierdiker Rebbe, they were printed from the handwriting of Reb Shmuel, the writer. If you would take out a Sefer Mamorim of the Rebbe Marash, Tafresh Chavav or Tafresh Chav Zayin, it's a famous Hemshech from the Rebbe Marash called Vehichrim, which is based on Pesach Dike Hemshech. It's printed from a written manuscript. In other words, it's not a typeset. What we have in front of us in the printed Sefer is the handwriting of Reb Shmuel. So recently the Rebbe instructed to reprint
the Ma'amarim of the Rebbe Marash, but to print them, the Rebbe uses the expression in Oisiyis Murabayis, in regular typeset, because it's much easier to learn a Maimah when we have access to the Maimah from when it's printed in regular printed letters, then we should have to sit over a Maimah and learn it from a handwriting. And the Rebbe spoke about it today. Even the Rambam's Sefer is printed in regular lettering. Just the commentary on the Rambam is printed in Rashi letters, but the Rambam itself is also printed in Oisiyis Murabayis, square letters. So the same, it's most appropriate, the Rebbe says, especially for people in Eretz Yisrael, it's much easier for them to read from square lettering than when we have to learn in a sefer which is printed, photocopy from a manuscript. And recently, one of the Svarim of the Ma'amarim of the Rebbe Marash was reprinted, Sefer of the Ma'amarim of the year Tafresh Chavav. It says that in Parshas Kedoshim, this week's Sedra, there's a Maimah there which begins Zocher Asiyim HaShabbos L'Katshoy. The Rebbe Marash there explains what's the whole concept of Shabbos, that the Avodah of the Yid is to take the L'Katshoy, to take the Kedusha from Shabbos, the sanctity from Shabbos, and instill it into the entire week. The Rebbe says when we're talking about this inyan, this is already another step closer in the inyan of Afatzas HaMayonos. And in this week's Sedre, Pashas Kedoshim, we're also told about V'ahavta l'Reyacha Kamoicha. And when it's V'ahavta l'Reyacha Kamoicha, when there's Avos Yisrael amongst Yidden, this leads to V'atem Adveikim B'Shem Elekechem Chayim Kulchem Ayoim. When Yidden are united, when Yidden are together, this leads to it that the Shechina dwells amongst Yidden. This is also part of Afatzas HaMayonos. For Afatzas HaMayonos is when we express care for other Yidden, and therefore we reach out to them by teaching them Chassidus and bringing them closer to Chassidus and so forth. And here the Rebbe brought a very geschmack taich on Parshas Kedoshim, which is explained the Chassidus. Pasuk says, Kedoshim to you. The Rebbe tells the Yidden that Yidden should be B'Kedusha. We should be holy, sanctity should be amongst Yidden. Ki Kodesh Oni. So Rashi says, Yochel Kamoini. I would want to think, Yochel, that the Yidden are as holy as the Rebishter. In other words, it's a question. Yochel Kamoini. I would want to think like me. In other words, meaning like the Rebishter. So the pasuk tells us, no. Kedushasi l'mayla mikdushaschem. My Kedusha, the Rebishter says, is holier than yours, higher than yours. But nonetheless, there's a Kedusha in you as well. So the Rebbe says, Chassidus Taich is different. Chassidus Taich is not that Yochel Kamoini is a question. Yochel Kamoini is a fact. Yochel Kamoini, the Rebishter says, every Yid is given such strength to do Avodas Hashem that he can reach the level of Kedusha, to the level Kedusha of the Rebishter. Not that Yochel Kamoini bit miya with a wonder, with a question. It's a question and answer. No, it's a statement, it's a fact. Yochel Kamoini, a Yid, through his Avodah, the Rebishter has given a Yid such koiches that through his Avodah he can reach to the highest level of Kedusha, to the level of the Rebishter's Kedusha. Rebbe ended the Farbrengen with a brief sicha that Shabbos gives bracha to the entire week. Memela, this week is a special week. It's the first day from Shabbos. We are entering right away into the day of L'Katchila Ariba, the day of Teferes Shebet Chazal tell us, Mefakchen al tzorchi tzibur b'Shabbos. We take care of public matters on Shabbos. Rebbe says, truth is that every Yid, every Yochid is like a tzibur. Every Yochid is as dear and precious as an entire group, as an entire congregation. But more than that, Mefakchen al tzorchi tzibur, the simple meaning is, we take care of public matters on Shabbos. The Rebbe gave a deeper taich today. The Rebbe Taich, we say in davening, Pekeach Ivrin. Shat Pekeach, Baruch Atah Hashem Pekeach Ivrin, we say every day. The Rebishter opens Ivrim, those that are blind. What's the pshat? Mefakchen al tzorchei tzibur b'Shabbos. We have to make openings to go ahead and make sure that we take care of the needs of the tzibur on Shabbos. And here the Rebbe says to make sure to reach out to every Yid. And we should not have any doubts, because if we are at a level of doubts, Sofek, that's B'gematria Amalek. Sofek is equivalent, in numerical value, Sofek is equivalent to Amalek. And Mamela, we got to utilize These days, these are special days, primarily to take upon ourselves and make good decisions, hachlotas toivos, and that all these decisions should be brought down into reality. And the Rebbe suggested to learn in this new Sefer HaMamarim that just came out, which we spoke about earlier, the Sefer HaMamarim of the Rebbe Marash, and also to organize proper Chassidische Farbrengens during the day of Beizir, during the day of Teferes, Shabbat Teferes. First of all, to have proper Farbrengens here, locally, and as well as all over, wherever there are Yidden, to reach out until all of this will lead to the coming of Mashiach, because really Mashiach has a shaykhis to each and every Yid. And here the Rebbe brings, there's a pasuk, Dorach koichav mi Yaakov. It's a pasuk in Pashas Bolok. So there are two midrashim. One medrash says that this pasuk refers to every Yid. Another Chazal say that this pasuk refers to Mashiach. So Rebbe has spoken about it many times. So Rebbe says to combine both of these pshatim, both of these pshatim are true. Why? Because every Yid has within him a spark of Mashiach. There's a nitzitz of Mashiach within each and every Yid. The Rebbe is concluding, again urging us to utilize, to make proper decisions, good hachlotes, and utilize all these hachlotes, all these decisions, to bring them down into reality. And we use the expression, we say at the end of a Masechta, we say, Kishem Shazar Tani, just like the Rebishter has helped us to finish this Masechta, the Rebishter should help us to finish other Masechtas as well. In other words, we should be able to continue in this Avodah, and all of this should come down. Lamatam Asarat Tvachim, we should have access to all of this, and all of this should be the Peil Mamish. And we know that when it comes to Geulah, the Rebbe always stresses that when it will come to the right moment of Geulah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will not hold it back. Afilu keheref ayin, even for a split second.